some of the problems that we did in class that might be similar to the problem that I included on your exam. So I'm going to do my best to record only one video, but you know, sometimes I have a lot to say. So one of the problems here, well, first to answer your question, how many problems do we have? We have a total of 13 questions, and the total of points for this problem, for this exam, well, I'll tell you in a minute, but 13 questions. So first question, you need to know how to graph an exponential function. And for this, you will be given a table of values. I will be giving you the specific x values. But remember that those values will not only be the only x values allowed in the domain. So you have to figure out what are the corresponding y values here. Now you could do that by hand. You could use your calculator. But you also need to draw the graph in the xy axis. And also by plotting the points. I apologize, that's my dog barking. So then you figure out your y values here and then plot your points, x and y. And then you have to come up with the graph and also answer the questions such as what is the domain, what is the range, what is the horizontal asymptote of the function, and also to answer the question, is the function increasing or decreasing? So I would suggest that you look at your notes and you look at the examples of graphing functions that we did in class. So another problem here also from section chapter 4. It is an application of an exponential function. And so for this one, if you are given an equation, you should be able to, I'm just going to write some random numbers here. You should be able to enter things like this on your calculator. So remember, it has its own key. Sometimes it opens that exponent. And you need to also be familiar with that button that is below number 3 on your keyboard of the calculator, the negative sign. So you need to use that if it's at the beginning, and you need to be aware of how to enter a number there in the exponent, and then if it's necessary, multiply by another number. So just make sure you do have some type of calculator for this test. Then another problem, you need to be familiar with the product and quotient rule, or property, I should say. Properties to expand and condense logarithms. And I believe this is section 4.3, so look at your notes and look at the examples of that we did in class. Look at both the expanding and condensing by using those properties. Also from chapter 4, make sure you know how to enter a function that, it might have some numbers. So if there's a negative at the beginning, make sure you use that negative key from the calculator. And then, you will enter your numbers. And just make sure you practice and that you know that for natural log ln, there is a key in your calculator pad. And then make sure that you know what numbers to substitute here in case, for example, if x equals to 10 corresponds to a year 2010, and I ask you a question that says, what will be the output if the year was 2012? So make sure you know how to go from there to the x value. And that is pretty simple as long as you do have your calculator. In this case, I will enter the number 12, and then you will get the output. And this is from section 4.3, so You could look at the examples that we did there. We also have, well, I believe this is from 4.4 or 4.3. And make sure you know how to solve an exponential equation. And specifically, something that you have to rewrite by changing the base, so that you can use the property that states that if you have two things that are the same base raised to different exponents, then you can assume that the exponents will be equal, and then you create a linear equation from there, and then you will solve for x. So you might want to get familiar with what are the powers of 2, also what are the powers of 3, what are the powers of 5, so that when you see the equation on the test, you don't panic and you know what to do. You could also look at your notes from sections 4.3 and 4.4. So another example is going to be section 4.4, and it is a word problem. And now here you have to work with not only if I give you the x value, find the y value or the function value. So you need to know how to work that backwards. So for example, if I give you the output of a function, and then you have to find what is the x value for that. So if you do have an equation on your problem, make sure you do use it. Here I'm just writing some random numbers. So make sure you use that. And for example, here, if I'm saying f of x is equal to 120, then you will substitute here f of x with 120. Then from here, you need to solve for x. So one of the things that you need to do, first, it will be remove this 0.5, which is multiplying the 3.2 to the power x. And since it is multiplying, you will do the inverse operation. So you will have 120 divided by 0.5. And I'm just going to leave it like that in parentheses. Then here I will have 3.2 to the power x. And what I can do here, one of my options is to take the natural log on both sides. From there, make sure you remember or you are familiar with the power property of logarithms. So that says that the exponent becomes the coefficient. And from here, just to finish and solve for x, we have the natural log of 120 divided by 0.5, and we will take this quantity, since it is multiplying to the x, once we take it across, it will be dividing. And when you enter this on your calculator, make sure that you have natural log, that you have pressed that key twice, one on the numerator, one for the denominator. And that is from 4.4. So make sure you do look at your notes. If you don't have them, you can find them on Blackboard. Now I'm going to move on to problem 7. And so problem 7 refers to section 5.1, which is simple interest. So make sure you do have that formula on your formula sheet. And remember, you will not be allowed to take the test unless you have a formula sheet. For simple interest, if you are given present value, time, and rate, you have to find the future value. So make sure that your time is in years, and make sure you know how to enter that on your calculator. For problem number 8, make sure you are familiar with the APY, or the effective rate. And that formula could be found on page 238 of your ebook. And with that formula, you need to know what is M, which is the number of compounding periods. So if it is monthly, it will be a 12. If it is quarterly, it will be a 4. If it is semi-annually, it will be a 1. You also need to be familiar with the rate. So that will be provided on the question, but you need to know how to convert a percent to a decimal. And of course, the formula, page 238, or you could also find it on your notes. For problem 9, you will need to know the formula for continuous compounding. And so you will be asked to find the future value. So you will need to know the present value, the rate, and the time. So for the rate, make sure you convert that into a decimal. The time, it needs to be in years. And make sure you know how to enter it on the calculator. As long as you press the key for E, and here you will have to multiply the rate times the time. For problem 10, you will be asked to find the payment by knowing the future value, the rate, the number of compounding periods, and the time. So for that one, I will suggest that you look at your notes for section 5.3 and example 5. And so you are allowed to include that formula on your test. So if you look at that or you look at your notes on Blackboard, you can find it there. And we derived the formula in class, so feel free to just write down how to use it. So for the last 3 questions, well, I want to tell you that if you look at pages 238, 261, and 262, you could find a pretty good summary of the formulas and an explanation of each formula, including definition of each variable. Also, you will need formulas from pages 246 to find the future value of annuity due. You also need the formula from page 242 of your ebook. That was my alarm. 242, and that one is to find the value of an ordinary annuity. So make sure you know the difference between ordinary and due. One of them is you make a payment at the end of each period, and the other one at the beginning. So make sure you include that on your formula, and actually this one is the beginning of each period. Also, you should know that for ordinary annuities, for sinking funds, you need that same formula, the one in page 242. Now, from the last problem, so this will cover your problems 11 and 12, and this 2 pages, problems 11 and 12. And for the last problem, you need to know, you can look at page 252, or you can look at the example 1 of section 5.4.